Hi everybody, let's just start again. I'm Pauline. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate the support. We're really winning it here, so I'm really pleased to be a part of this anthology that Jan's put together. It was a stab in the dark for me sending out my little story out into the world, and thankfully Jan picked it up, so thank you, Jan. A funny incident about this event tonight is, as we were talking over the email in between editing, I said, well, where do you live? He said he lives in Brisbane. I said, I live near Brisbane. We wave to each other. And I said, why don't we, catch up sometime? Let's bump shoulders at a book launch. And hey presto, he thought that was a great idea. So here we are. So thank you for supporting us. Does anyone have any questions to help me along here?
Tell us a bit about your story.
Okay, the question was to tell us a little bit about my story. My story is probably one of the nastiest stories in the book.
The nastiest.
It's called The Killing Pen. It's about 1,500 words. It's not long. Yeah, it is. I won't go into too much detail because there are children here. But whenever we write a story, well, with this particular story, I came up with the first line, which was knit, don't knot. Okay. Now, I'm a sewer by trade. When I'm not writing, I'm sewing on a big industrial sewing machine. So I know a lot about sewing, and they always say, write what you know. So this line stuck with me, and I'm, of course, then I had to think, well, what would need knitting and not knotting? Now, for anyone who doesn't know how to feed horses with horse bags, when they sew the horse feed bags up, you can pull one line and the whole thing unravels. Okay, so that's what I had in mind with this story. What would need unraveling? The story kind of went from there. It was very nasty. I set it in a leather tannery, which is something that I'm also familiar with. And it was a little bit along the lines of like animal activists, stopping cruelty to animals, as well as solving problems in the girl's past. She was the protagonist. So it wasn't very nice. It was good for her, good for the dears, not so pleasant for the guy involved. Anyway, Jan liked it, and there it is in the book. Here we are. I apologise for anyone that I might traumatise after you read it.
They actually winced. I finished and went, ooh. Yeah, I'll have that one.
It was very nasty. It was very well written. You'll enjoy the writing.
Thank you. Yeah, so whenever we write stories, it's, just telling a story, we've got to exaggerate everything. A good story, make everything bigger, we're always told. Make it painful for your characters is what we're taught to do and told to do time and time again. This one is probably a really good example of that, I think. And it was simply, what I was doing is making it bigger, making it more horrible, making everything hurt, making it, visually horrific, for the sole purpose of writing a horror story. If it's had the desired effect that people wince, then I have done my job. So I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so I'm Pamela, and my story is called Dread Circus. And at the time that I wrote it, I had been watching way too much of The Greatest Showman, so I thought, circuses, let's do this. The premise behind the book is the question, what value does your soul have? So at what point would you sell your soul for something that's important to you? So in my story, there's two protagonists. It's told from two points of view, a mother and a daughter. And the mother had sold her soul for 30 years of extra life because she had cancer. So she thought that was a good deal. She would get 30 years of extra life, and her contracts come up. So that's the question. So what happens then? So her daughter's there, and so where the mother was, motivated by life, the daughter becomes motivated by revenge because she has to, does she want to save her mother? I won't happens so you can enjoy it and read it. But that was the premise behind the story. Yeah, so the idea was, at the time I was looking at, I had read an anthology call out for a story that looked at colour, using colour in stories. And I thought that was really, really clever. So being an interior designer in my other life, not a writer, the idea of colour really appealed to me, and the way that it affects us in a, our emotional states and how people engage with it in space. So that was my other inspiration for writing it. And then Jen Andrew said offbeat horror. Now, I don't usually write horror, but then he said to me, you're an author, you can write. So why not do horror? I thought, okay, I can do this, I can give it a go. So I did. So yeah, so that's where my story came from, and obviously it worked. I was really pleased to be a part of this anthology, and very grateful for Jan to include me in it with a host of wonderful authors like Pauline here. I don't know that mine's the goriest story in the thing, but it's a pretty story for a horror story. It's got lots of colour in it. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. That was my story. Did anybody have any other sort of questions that they'd like to know about the story, or about the process of writing it, or anything like that? No?
Well, I can just say, if this was your first horror story, you did very well.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll keep trying. Just make it not too
I have a
good.
question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
How does it feel to be a writer?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. It feels amazing to be a writer, because I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little girl. So, and I've always had a creative background as well. So hence the interior design, and I'm also an artist and a book cover artist. And yeah, it's just the next kind of step for me. Like if I didn't write, I'm happy when I write. It makes me happy. That's how it makes me feel. Great question. Thank you.
How do you choose the design of your titles, of your covers?
So my covers, I'm a digital artist, so I choose, basically it's just a visual thing. It's kind of like a graphic design sort of eye, I suppose. So I choose visuals that are punchy. It's digital manipulation, so I use artwork from other people and manipulate it to suit the covers that I make for my stories and my books, and for other people's work as well. It's very fun. I love it.
I have a question as well.
Sure.
I think yours is the only circus-themed horror I've ever read that doesn't feature a clown. Were you not
Sounds
tempted?
freaked me out. I told you I wasn't a horror author. I can't scare myself. No, yeah, you're right. I didn't put a clown in there. I didn't even think of that, to be honest. The ringmaster I find more terrifying. I guess he's the protagonist, or the character who's in the position of power. And when you kind of think of circuses back in the old day, it was always the animals in the cages, the performers that didn't quite fit into society, or those kinds of things. So for me, I guess the ringleader is more terrifying than the clown in the circus, and that's why he's in there as the evil one. Yeah.
So is it an evil Hugh Jackman?
Totally. It could be Zac
You said,
Efron.
you said
Let's
oh,
mix
could be
it up.
Zac,
Could be
yeah.
Zac. We'll see. Let's go Hugh. He's got much more charisma, I think. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. That this is all I can say. This is a wonderful book to be a part of, and I'm really, really thankful to be involved in it. So I recommend, if anybody here likes horror, you should read it. The kids should probably wait a few years. My daughter, she saw one of my stories on a bench one day and saw that it had a decapitated horse in the first paragraph, and she's like, "Mum, what are you writing?" I'm like, "Sorry, I forgot you could read now." You've learned. Damn. So I have to put the manuscripts up higher now so she can't find them. So yeah, does anyone else have any questions that they'd like answered? No?
Why science fiction, normally?
Why science fiction normally? I guess I was, I had this amazing mum who used to wake me up at midnight to watch Star Trek Next Generation. Yeah, I don't know, that was cool. X-Files was also another thing that I love to watch. Star Wars. I love the movies The Martian, Interstellar, all those kinds of things. I find it really clever how it looks at humanity and the very best and the very worst of us. So I guess horror sort of plays on that as well, but that's what I love most about science fiction. And the cool thing about it is you can blend it with everything else. You can blend it with horror to get cosmic horror. You can blend it with fantasy to get, you know, something weird. You can blend it with weird westerns. You get cowboys and versus aliens kinds of things. So all those kinds of things. It gives you a broad range, and it's really character focused, which I really enjoy as well. Because yeah, like I said, the very best and the very worst of us. And I feel that if you can get your readers to feel something in your story, then you've won. That's the whole point. Yeah. You're up, Jen.
You're late.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't.
Maybe it's my time, so.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. We're kind of painted into a corner here tonight because we foolishly said children could come, which means we can't read any of the stories, and we can't really go into the nitty-gritty of. But since my daughter and my son are both here, actually, my son Harper said, "You're not going to be bored, are you? You're not going to read a story." Okay. But one of the horror is an interest, and my children have also said to me, they're like, "What is it with you and horror? Why are you so fascinated about it?" And the truth is, I'm not. It looks like I am. I actually run a ghost tour company in Scotland, investigating a thing called the Mackenzie Poltergeist. I wear black, but not for any sinister reason, just making me a bit thinner. That's all. And I promised I would tell my children, I'd tell a story so that they would be bored in the hour they had to sit here. And basically the whole idea of the horror anthology, I wanted a horror thought about offbeat horror, because I don't like gruesome, nasty stuff. I mean, I included one or two because I know that you can't have a horror anthology without some nasty stuff in it. But I was also interested in some weird horror, really, and I was going to recount the reason because I've written quite a few horror books now, and it kind of came to me by accident. In fact, writing came to me by accident as well, but the writing horror certainly came to me by accident, and the reason was that many years ago, before I started writing at all. I was bored of my job. I was looking for something to do. And I heard before internet, so I was in a newspaper, I heard about a job going doing construction in New York. I thought, okay, I'm working as a financial consultant. I hate it. I'll phone him up. So I phoned up this guy, Willie Schmidt, his name was, fantastic guy, and said, "I hear you're looking for someone to do construction. I'm your man." And he was like, "Can you build?" "Can I build?" "I'm Scottish." We're Scottish, but we build everything. We build bridges, houses, trees. I once built a wardrobe from IKEA without the instructions.
Stand up.
You're hired. So we went. I went out there. It turned out it was New York State, not New York City. It was nice. And it was construction for a 500-seat children's theatre in New York State. And my job was to build sets. And I have never built anything in my life, nor did I know how to. Did you know, for instance, and some of you probably, that if you want to build something and you want it to stay up, you use screws? I didn't know that. So I found these 10-penny nails that were about that long. And the first thing I had to build was a flight of stairs for this theatre, and because the kids were doing a musical number, and they were going to come running down the hall, up the stairs, onto the stage, start the first musical number. All right, fine. Built the stairs with big 10-penny nails. I painted it. I can paint. I'm a good painter, so I painted it black. Probably very nice. And it was a kids' theatre, 500-seat kids' theatre. So they're rehearsing in the corner. They've got the kids' orchestra, and the kids came in, burst in through the door. They ran down the theatre, and they stopped. They stopped for the stairs. I'm like, come on. Up. Like up the stairs. I'm like, we're not gonna do that. I said, why not? It wobbles when you touch it. Well, it wobbles sideways. No. I was like, look, tell you what. Now, those of you who write will know what's coming next. I'll run up the stairs. And if it holds my weight, you'll be fine. Because I am big and you are small. Right, okay. So now just go. So do a little dance at the top. The entire thing. Apparently, I don't remember too much about this, but apparently there was a huge cloud of dust over there. The orchestra. And I stood up and my hair was like plaster stuck to it in all directions. And what? And the orchestra. What? What? And I looked down and there was a plank of wood, a big plank of wood right across there, nailed to my leg, and it going through the middle of the gap in the shin bone, and it come out the side, and then it bent. So it was like that way. Is there an infirmary in this place by any chance? They're like, yeah, down there. I was like, okay, well, you guys rehearse. I'll be back. Off down to the infirmary, which was run by a nurse called Betsy Denton. Loved Betsy Denton, she was great. So I went in and she was put a plaster on the little kid. And I'm like, excuse me, she's like, excuse me. Oh. I've just finished with this patient. So she put the plaster on this boil or whatever he had. Finished that, I'm standing there, blood seeping down my leg. And then she turns around and goes, finished. Now, what seems to be the problem? So I showed her, and she's like, okay. And I know there's children here, but I'm doing this joke anyway. She's like, get on the floor, and I'll get on top of you. I was like, okay. But I do have a black wood nail to my leg. And she's like, I know. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not going to do it. I think. She put me down on the floor, put one foot on my chest. And I'm like, no, don't. I can have an anesthetic or like whiskey, anything. And the nail went, the whole thing was a big fountain of blood shot into the air. And I'm like, ah! And she was like, would you like a plaster on that? And at that point, the money guy from the theatre came running down, Paul Brindless. And in America, you can sue people for anything. So he ran and he was like, oh my God, what have we done? Look, don't sue us. We'll compensate anything. And I'm like, no, it's my fault. I'm the one who was trying to, and Betsy's like, oh, you're right. It's your fault for hiring an idiot. And he's like, well, what can we do? How can we make this up to you? What's the best job in the theatre? Writing and directing. I was like, I'd like to write and direct your next play, please. And he's like, seriously? Yeah. He's like, can you write? I was like, yeah, of course I've written shopping lists, Christmas cards, whatever, anything. He's like, no, plays. I was like, yes, of course I have. Because I'm thinking I've got 8, and he's like, okay, we've got a slot in 2 weeks. So we'll put you on. You can write and direct it. I was like, 2 weeks. You might be wondering where the horror element comes in apart from my leg, but it's coming now. So I had 2 weeks to write and rehearse and put on this play, and I'd never written anything in my life. I'd never wanted to. I was not interested in writing whatsoever. And it was a kids' theatre. So I was like, I painted myself into complete colour. So I got a couple of kids. I've got to write a play. What do you suggest? And they're like, horror. Okay. Our mums won't let us watch horror. Won't let us watch anything horror. Is that okay? And anything else? They're like, kill children in it. Kill us all. Kill everybody. I was like, all right. So I was like, okay. So I sat down with the kids and I wrote a play. Just as quick as I could. And then we rehearsed it and we put it on. And we managed it all in 2 weeks. And you know when you go to the theatre and the curtains like shut at the end, and the audience stands up and they'll clap and applaud, and there's a standing ovation. on the night we put on, like we finished, the curtains closed, there's absolute silence. And me and one of the kids went and looked at some curtains, and the entire audience, and all the kids had invited their parents. So we looked at it, and a sea of. And I grabbed one of the kids who went past on the way out. I was like, yeah. I was like, so? They hated it, didn't they? Like, yeah. But the kids loved it. Oh my God, how many children did you kill in that? And so inventively, how did you get the thing where the kid's head fell off? Well, that was an accident. That's a great tricks as well. If you, the children here, right? If you want to freak out your parents, get your sister or something. Soak a bread roll, right? Fill it with jam or something. Tape it to your neck, and then just do that, and it'll just. From a distance, it looks like a real thing. And that was it. That was where we started.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, okay, that's what people. And I specialise in writing children's books, but they're horrible ones, and the kids die. There's no kids in it. Yeah, these are the adult ones, but the kids' books I write normally have a lot of children. The first one I ever wrote about pretend everybody, all the children die in chapter 1. Everybody. Yeah. And then it just tells the story of how they died. It's very easy to write something like that too. And that led to me then starting my own ghost tour company, and and just horror seems to follow me around, like Marlon Brando, Apocalypse. That's probably more information about me than you ever needed. So does anybody have any? And I told you I'd tell a story, Harper. There you go. And that's why I like horror. I don't actually like it. It just seems to be stuck to me like. Yeah, like man-eating flesh.
I feel like there's like several layers of horror going on there as well. Like from an architect's point of view, the fact that you building is a horror story. You've got the blood and gore, and you're horrifying parents. You've got all covered all bases. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. I try. Yes.
What do you mean by offbeat horror?
I don't know.
Can you
What do I mean by offbeat horror? I don't really know. I had noticed, this was the first, I'd done a couple of anthologies before, but they were much smaller, and this was the first time I put out a call for international authors to sort of contribute. But I noticed that a lot of the small presses that were bringing out horror anthologies, they were very, very specific. Can it be about crabs from Mars, or it has to do with, the goddess Diana, or something very, very specific stuff. And I felt like narrowed it, narrowed the parameters far too much. So I deliberately picked a word that could have any kind of interpretation. Because it seems to be the done thing that you can't just go, I'd like to write a book of horror. I wanted to do a book of horror stories. You had to have some kind of angle to it. And I thought offbeat horror would give me a much broader spectrum of horror stories, and also I'd get some that are funny. And I actually like horror comedy. Mm-hmm. I don't mean all yucks, so there's no tension or anything like that. And the really good writers can do it. They can make it frightening and kind of funny at the same time. So that's what I was aiming for. And I got, wow, just range. We got 800 entries. I know. So it was really difficult to narrow it down, but I got the rest.
Thanks for picking us.
I didn't pick you really. It's just obvious.
Was an accident.
Doesn't matter what happened.
Pamela and Pauline.
How many stories in the book out of those 800?
It was supposed to be one book with 21 stories. But the quality was so high and the quantity was so high that it's actually now a trilogy. So the first one, Neen will hold it up. That is so wrong. It was the first one that came out 2 or 3 months ago. The one that we are celebrating today or commiserating today is volume 2, which imaginatively is called That's Too Wrong. And of course, number 3 is That Is All Wrong. And they'll feature the same girl on the front who will doubtless grow up to be traumatized.
I have a question for you guys as writers. So, for all of you, what in your life has affected your writing in a surprising way?
I guess for me, it was having kids. If I didn't have my kids, I wouldn't be writing. I would still be having my full-time job, working, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and there would be no time for words then. But I have two amazing children that actually are very, very supportive of my writing, and they're excited and going on the journey with me. So I really wouldn't be here without them, without my husband and my mum and my family. Yeah, so that was surprising. I thought having kids would stop you from writing, but actually for me it was opposite, which was really wonderful.
Well, I suppose being a parent as well with children, my oldest daughter is here tonight, my husband. I stopped writing when we had children, because the family came first. And it was never always in the back of my mind, and I must have kept so many notebooks all tucked away, and scribbles and whatever. But I really didn't start writing until 10 years ago. Like, when I sat down, actually, I think my second daughter, she turned 15 and co-written a book with a school friend. And she came home one day and they printed this book and sent it to America and got it bound. And here they had this book, and I looked at it and gone, my God, my daughter has beaten me to it. Kids. So I thought, right, I really need to get serious now. And that's when I sat down and gave myself a big boot up the backside and sat down and wrote my first novel. And I wrote that in 6 months. And then I wrote the second one, and then I wrote the third one, and then I realised I needed to learn how to write. So for the last 10 years, I've been writing in short stories, and found that I loved them. It also took me away from the novel. So the novel coming out next year is the one that I've started 10 years ago. But all these short stories I've been doing have helped me get to that point next year. So I wouldn't change any of it. It's all been necessary. It's been a whole journey, but but I just put everything off until late. And when I first started writing, I used to write in pen, notebook and pen, and I had a manual typewriter. Okay, I didn't even have a computer. I think we had a computer. I started typing on that. I'd get RSI on my hands because I had to learn how to type, and I couldn't type on the story and think about what to write. That actually took me about a year to do that. So what I would do is I'd write on pen and paper through the day, and then at night I'd sit up and type it. And after doing that for a year, eventually I got to the point where as I was typing it, I was changing it. And yeah, it's not that long ago I was doing that, which always amazes me.
Did you have the liquid paper too?
Carbon
I had
paper?
to do that. Carbon paper, old school.
Old school, yeah. The whole writing's been a real journey for me. I grew up where you would look up publishers in the back of magazines and see if they wanted to sell. You could send them a book, or you look through the telephone book to find an address to send them to. My very first, I did send my novel out 10 years ago. I posted it. The whole thing, big postage thing. Everything online now is so much easier. But I had to learn all that. I had to learn how to use the internet, Google, how to type on Word documents. I had to learn all of that because that was all foreign to me. That was all new age stuff. I was back in the handwritten typewriting days. So it has been, I think writing now, that coming into it a bit later, has totally transformed my life, but I wouldn't change it for a second. I love it. So yeah.
I guess that story kind of illustrated that I started writing actually, although it meant that I found a thing I loved. So from that point on, I just continued to write. I started writing books, and to me, starting a ghost tour company was the same thing. I mean, I was the guide, so I would tell stories. And it's just that whole telling stories thing. But it has changed now over the years. With my 2 younger children, I've got an older son who's 21, and I killed him so many times in books. I wrote one book about a son and father who go across country, and the father's psychotic and is planning to kill his son. And I dedicated it to child who was 6. Still haven't forgiven me for that, but I've got 2 young children here, and now the way I write has changed in that they're the toughest audience I have ever had. I don't know, I'm on book 38. I've tried to read the first chapter to them every single book, and it's like, yeah, all right, next. To the extent where I actually wrote a book that hasn't been published yet, called Spooky Boogles, where they both star in it as inept superheroes. But they didn't really like that either. So that's my goal now, is to write a book that my children will not know when I start reading it.
I have a question for you, Jen. You are both a writer and an editor. Do you have a preference as to which one that you like to do better than the other? Like which one you like to do more?
Yes. Editing's strange. I hate editing.
So do I.
But I like the fact that I'm able to help people. And that's I wouldn't stop, because that's the reason for doing it. When you write, if I'm writing because it's like being a little god. You're creating all this stuff in worlds, and you can do whatever you like, and it's also great for delving into your own mentality and who you are, how you feel, and what you really think about things. Obviously, I hate children. No, I'm joking. But with editing, I'm actually helping other people, and that is invaluable to me. It just makes me feel I'm doing something worth my while in life. If I can help someone with that, so I like both for different reasons.
People always die in the end of my stories. I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah.
The opposite, I do try to keep them alive.
I don't know if you always want to stay alive.
Keep them alive so you can torture them, isn't it?
So does anyone else have any other questions? Again, anything to do, it doesn't just have to be about the anthology, yes?
I actually think it's quite compelling. We can't tell you anything about this book. Like, it's actually pretty good. It's like we actually all have to go and buy it now. Are there things you're allowed to say, like a couple of phrases? Can you throw us a couple of crumbs?
I could probably, sorry Harper, if you don't want to read the story, I could probably read the first couple of paragraphs of mine. It's not too scary. Are you good with that, Jen?
Oh yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Sleep and have to pull it off if you want to.
I've read it.
Okay, just got to find it here.
I mean, we chose not to read out massive bits because there are children here, but there are 3 or 4 of the stories which I think are just laugh out loud funny, and also ridiculous. I get the books mixed up, but this one's got one about a bunch of stoners who go looking to try and catch a bear so that they can be on YouTube.
You should read that one next.
That doesn't end well. So that kind of thing. There are funny ones as well. But sorry, when you go.
No, you're all right. Okay, so mine's called Dread Circus. The first point of view is Sabine, the mother. This circus hungers for sorrow and souls, and our ringmaster is the butcher who feeds it. His footsteps fall heavy as he circles me, brocade gleaming gold against the blood red of his jacket. His whip trails in the sawdust, braided brown leather, serpent thin, and the knotted end wicked. You will fly, Sabine, he says. My muscles tremble, my heart raps against my ribs. I look to the audience, stands for help, but they are empty, cleared since this night's performance finished 5 hours ago. Only midnight's cruel darkness watches now. I clench my fists, clawing at the newly wrecked sawdust floor of the main ring. The dry scent of wood curls around me. I will not, I say. Another step. The ringmaster's whip slithers. The terms of your contract are clear. One soul for 30 years of help. I kept my side of the bargain. Now you must keep yours. It was a contract signed with the devil's henchman. I was young and dying, cancer in my bones. Who would not give their soul in return for 30 years more of life? The cost seemed worth the gain at the time. Single spotlight pins me to the floor, its beam ephemeral but as strong as any prison. My fear crowds closer. Beyond, half hidden in the shadows, I glimpse the red white of the big top's canvas walls, brilliant colours, colours that consume. The fabric billows, but not in the friendly way a breeze moves canvas. Something seethes behind the surface, dwelling in the space between the fabric and the outside world. Something with claws. My chin dips to my chest. A sob sits locked behind my teeth. If I fly, my daughter Belle will be left with him. She's only 16 years old. The ringmaster's voice is smoke and coloured with the promise of death. Shall your child be made to go in your place? No. The word tears out of my throat before I think. You cannot. The ringmaster smiles. His long silver moustache gleams like chrome. Then you will fly. A shadow catches my attention. A small, thin shape slithers in between the arena seats. A flash of white blonde hair. Belle. My stomach drops. I told her not to come.
Can I read like
Please, yeah.
2 paragraphs of my story, because just to show you I wasn't kidding your children, I'm sorry about this. Starts off Austin, Texas, 1996. Cherry bomb killed children. Cute, pint-sized little children. Then he hid them in people's cars. It created a nice double victim scenario. Pepe Pineda was the owner of Janet's Eatery, 132nd in Guadalupe. A stocky, unassuming, second-generation Mexican immigrant. He looked like a cross between Sitting Bull and Bob Hope. On Saturday, it's not comedy, on Saturday at 9 AM, he walked yawning from the early morning bustle of his restaurants and slid into his car, easing gingerly over the scalding street with steep leather. Starting the engine, he manoeuvred between the slumbering vehicles in the parking lot, squinting sleepily at the low-slung sun. He bumped over the balding grass verge and onto the slip road between his property and the neighbouring post house bar. As he shifted gears, his old Lincoln Mercury died. Now, there were 2 dead things in the alley.
Love it.
Yours, sorry, no. Yes.
Last 2 paragraphs.
This might be a hard one to answer, but do you remember why you chose these 2 stories?
Repeat the question.
The reason I chose the stories from Pamela and Pauline, each of the stories I chose had something that differentiated it from the others. With Pauline's, I thought, well, this is pure horror. This is what horror really is, classical horror is about. So I put that one in for that reason. With Pam's, I felt this is graceful. It's, it's horror, but it's beautifully written and lyrical. And that's what I mean. I wanted all sorts of different things. I wanted funny. I wanted 1 or 2 stories to be head scratching, like what the hell is this about? A couple to be real. So when you read them, you thought this is so well written. And then I wanted, the thing I didn't want, and I really managed to miss out almost entirely. There's no zombies. There's no vampires. No werewolves. The one that's coming out does have a vampire in it, or 3, but they're called Pork, Shark, and Boner. It's just that. And this one does have a werewolf in it, but again, because it's so, I was like, it isn't, the werewolf hardly ever appears in the book. It's in the story itself. It revolves around the people that it's hunting, and that really stick out for me. So there was always something about each story that you just know, when you've read something good. I would read the story. I put that day's batch down, and then the next day I wake up and go, which one do I remember? Which one? Oh, that one. Yeah, that one. So that's how it works.
Is it true you nearly moved back to Scotland when you read Pauline's unless you wanted to make it?
I've just got back from Scotland. Actually. I went over there, and again, like I say, horror seems to follow me around because I went over to Scotland basically to see my son, the one that wants to speak to me after, and also to sort of look at my business. And when I was there, I was contacted by a film crew from Paramount TV, who said we're doing a big hour-long feature on the Mackenzie poltergeist, which is what Mike goes to investigates for Paramount Television. Would you like to be in it for 15 minutes and get your side of the story? So I turned up. I spent the entire day there, then the entire next day, and then they came to my house in Australia today. I'm like, in. Like they turned up, they phoned me, they're like, we're sending a camera kid to your house. I'm like, I live in Australia. Well, yeah, no. Sure enough, they turned up this morning. They're in my room, in my bedroom, filming me while I talk about this stupid poltergeist. So it just follows me around. Cursed by it, really. And yes, Harper, I did mention you, like you requested. They might cut that out, but I did mention you.
Maybe you can just look at it, you're helping the poltergeist out. Just like a writer, giving him voice.
He doesn't need voice. Plenty nasty on his own. It's the best documented supernatural case now of all time. Yeah. It's quite something. If anyone's interested, I've written a novel about it, which is a little bit.
It's amazing.
Called Father Figure.
So have you written any novels or anything like that, Pauline? You mentioned writing short stories, but then you also said you have written a novel. Have you published?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I've published plenty of short stories now. The novel that I've got coming out next year is the one that I've spent the last 10 years working on. Finally, it has a home and it will be coming out next year. So, it's called Memories Don't Lie.
Nice.
But I don't want to give too much away about that one because we're here for this, and
I don't mind.
And I want that one to be a surprise. So yeah, it's but I'm everything I've done in my writing career has been for that. And yeah, so that it's been a journey, but it's all been for that novel. So fingers crossed it comes out really well. But I'm very happy with it. They often say, after spending so much time, I've had conflicting reports. People say, if the idea doesn't work, just give up, write another one. You don't get your first novel published, it's always the fourth one. If you're 7 years through your novel, well, you're halfway there, maybe, and I'm thinking I'm ticking all these boxes because, this is my first novel, but it's about the 5th time I've written it, I've rewritten it. I'm 10 years into it now, so I'm well and truly over halfway. What else did I skip? That was it. But the short stories, I do really love writing a short story, and I think most of the short stories I write other novels I don't have time to write because they're quick and you can finish them, and that's a real satisfaction to get a beginning, middle, and end in such a short space, and it really has helped hone my writing ability, condensing a big story into a little story and tightening it up so much. That's what I've been working on for the last few years. And the horror, I only kind of turned to horror a couple of years ago with The Best Medicine. When I wrote that, I kind of hit a bit of a low point and I'm thinking, I can't write a thing here at the moment. And I just sat down and somewhere that one came out. And it's done so well around the place. It's won the competition, got published in Midnight Echo. They picked it up in Italy. I can't even say this. Real, shortened to real. It's the big games and entertainment industry, and they put out an anthology with all the winning stories from around the world, and it ended up in that. So it was just like, yes, translated into that. It's won me a couple, shortlisted on and finalists. It's taken me on a really wild ride, which was great. But that's me. That's horror. I grew up reading Stephen King books, like as most of us my age did, you know, It and Carrie and Cujo and all his older stories, and I used to always think, I'll never be able to write a world like he does. I mean, he's a master, but I really want to write a good horror story. So just keep trying.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? You've just got to write your story.
Yeah.
You know, we can't be those people, but
No, you can't
we've
be
all
those
got
people.
something to say that's important. So
Yeah, so I'm just enjoying it at the moment, enjoying writing horror. I'm working on other stories at the moment, which I think they are some of my even better ones because I'm learning all the time. I'm starting to really get into that groove now and targeting the specific things I want, and it's paying off. Yeah, so yeah.
a question for you again, Jan. Which one's your favourite story in this one? Which one would you recommend for them to read first?
For mine.
You can say yours if that's it.
Um,
No pressure from the two authors sitting here.
Let me have a look. It's because that's not fair, because I'm going to say yours.
No.
Yours.
You don't have to.
Apart from you.
Apart from us.
you two. No, what's that? That's all. Let me see. Which one did I like? Right. There's one called Dragon Rufus Interrupts Class. I read it, I was like, what is this? It's by a guy who runs a laundromat. But at night time he has a sort of dojo. You'll appreciate that I'm pointing there. A specific person, David, who translates Japanese. He has a dojo and he's a sort of kung fu master. And he's interrupted in his empty kung fu class by Dragon Rufus, who accuses him of inappropriate behaviour towards a student, and they have this big face-off, which his son interrupts. And it just descends into inane drivel to the point where some kind of insect creature that he's bioengineered comes in and begins to fight with him, and they end up, well, they're children here, I'm not even going to say what they end up doing, and it's just the whole thing. And then it ends, and I got to the end and I was like, I don't understand this ending at all. I couldn't get it out right. It's up because it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. The writing is just so funny. And it reminded me of Douglas Adams, actually.
Yeah.
Douglas Adams had taken something that made him think and write 5 times as fast as he normally did. So I love that one. I think that's a great one. And it's the funny ones I like. There's one in it called Sugar Mice as well. Which is just, it's a Victorian, sort of Edgar Allan Poe Victorian tale, but done with a sensibility that, at the end, the village is in more, I'm going to tell you that, just for this one story, at the ending, the village is in mortal danger, and the sort of wizard has to save the village by dancing around a ley line and doing all these incantations and stuff like that. And then he goes, I really cannot be arsed. Only bug yourself. Fantastic. So they're the ones I like, and obviously, but that they tickled me. But it's a horror anthology, so they're few and far between the really funny ones. There's much more bitter, nasty stuff in there as well. Incidentally, because we're coming near to the end, I want to thank you all very much for coming, especially since it's a Monday night and and everybody in the world has COVID. So it's great. So I said there'd be some free giveaways. So at the back, there are a few books set out in the back. They're proof copies. So they've got 1 or 2 little mistakes in them, but they're pretty much the way they should be. So you guys can help yourselves to them. Most of them are young adult books. So if you've got kids, that's not really a problem. My kids don't like them, but yours might. So, or to me, there's not a huge amount of difference between a young adult book and an adult book. I consider young books they're just adult books without the swearing, basically. So I think they're suitable for adults as well. But there's 7 or 8 out there, so just help yourselves if you wish to do so, unless you have any more questions. That means we could go and have a glass of wine.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Do you round up?
Thank you very much for coming.
At the county, you don't even have to look for them, and I can't think of an event that's had that many teasers, so you have to go and find them. It's basically a new thing now. So thank you all for coming, and don't forget to get these guys to sign them afterwards.
So, that's okay, they stopped recording.
Oh, cool. Oh, I had actually read it all before, and as soon as I start speaking, it's like,
Yeah.
I think